Well, one of the most established practices in the field of marketing and customer evaluation is to summarize a customer using what's called RFM segmentation, which means I take everything I know about my customer and I compute just three simple numbers. How recently did they buy? Meaning when's the last time they bought? How frequently do they buy, meaning the number of time periods in which they bought, and when they buy, how much money do they spend? That's called RFM segmentation. It's the basis of the way in which most companies decide who are the valuable customers and who are the non-valuable customers. And my research is very simple. It basically says that's not a complete characterization of customers. You have to add one more letter to RFM, and I call that C, which means clumpiness, which means some customers do buy in a regular pattern. And historically, if you bought orange juice, if you bought diapers, you bought things in a regular pattern. But clumpiness refers to the fact that people buy in bursts. And those burst periods indicate something very different about the customer and that those customers could be extremely valuable. The key takeaways of my research is very simple. Let's imagine you want to build a simple what I call a simple mathematical model. You want to predict who are going to be the valuable customers in the future, and you have four things you can use to predict it. As I mentioned, recency, frequency, monetary value, and let's say the marketing spend towards the customer. Those are the classic ways in which companies build what are called scoring models. I'm claiming you need to add one more number, and that's C, how clumpy the customer is. This is no more difficult to compute than RFM. You can do it in Excel. It's very quick to compute. You can compute it for literally 100 million customers in a second, and the findings of my research suggest that higher clumpy customers are worth more out of sample, meaning in their future value, even after controlling for RFM and marketing expenditure, which means we have found another variable that firms should track about customers and use it to predict their worth in the future. Two things surprised me about my conclusions. One is I just figured that this RFM-based segmentation, which had been around for so long and is used by so many firms, had been validated in the sense that there wasn't anything else simple out there that could help explain customer value. I mean, you can do all kinds of fancy web scraping and all kinds of other variable construction, but clumpiness is so simple. So first, I was surprised that that had been missed. That, in other words, hot and cold periods are indicative of something about the customer. I think the second part that surprised me is that at least the data sets I've analyzed, it's true for, let's call it digital and online consumption goods, but it's not true for regular consumer packaged goods. In other words, historical models, I can see why they fit fine, because you buy toilet paper in a regular pattern, you buy orange juice in a regular pattern, but you don't consume Hulu in a regular pattern. You don't bid on auctions at eBay at a regular pattern. You don't buy books at Amazon on a regular-based pattern. So I think the two things that surprised me is, number one, that people had missed what seemed to me to be something fairly obvious, and secondly, that it applies historically. If you look at historically purchased goods, clumpiness really isn't there. But if you look in the new wave, the new economy, clumpiness is pervasive in every data set I've analyzed. I think of all the research I've done over my career, which is now, it's hard for me to believe, but it's been a 20-year career, I think this is probably the most practical thing I've done. The work I do tends to be what I call fancy, complex statistical modeling, and this isn't about statistical modeling. This is about a number, clumpiness, that firms can actually compute today. They don't need to collect any additional data. It's the same data they're using to compute RFM and customer lifetime value, and they can figure out how much value it adds to predicting customer value. Your rank ordering of customers will change. Your decisions about which customers are valuable to reactivate. Imagine customers have churned. Well, which ones are valuable to reactivate? My claim is the clumpy ones, even though they've churned, those are the ones to reactivate. Because if you reactivate them, they'll come back and be clumpy again and do a lot of stuff in the future. So I think it has huge practical value, and the beauty of it is, if you go to my website, I have an Excel sheet there that has worked out examples. It actually has an Excel sheet that you can just download, and you can start using clumpiness today. A lot of people have today talked about big data. And I love big data, but I'll tell you what I love even more than big data. I love data compression. And what I mean by data compression is you can collect thousands and thousands of variables on people now. You can track where they are, you can track what they bought, what web pages they looked at, but that's not science. That's data collection. Now the question is which of that information is actually useful for the business problem at hand? And that's what I call data compression. So the way I view clumpiness as an addition to traditional variables like RFM, marketing activity and stuff like that, I view it as a form of, let's call it increased data compression. I'm just telling you, you need to keep a little bit more data. You can't compress things down to 3 numbers, you got to compress it down to 4. So I view this research that I'm doing as I view it in the data compression world. I love the problem of taking big data and compressing it down to small data, and that's how I view clumpiness. The part that's unknown to me right now, which is I've done a lot of work on clumpiness. I know it exists across industries. I know it exists. I know it can be of predictive value. Here's what I don't know. What causes it? So what I do know is I've related marketing activity to clumpiness. So firms can try to make you clumpy by sending you an email, by sending you a catalog, by targeting you, etc. That much I know. But I haven't really studied yet what's the optimal way in which firms should target you, knowing that clumpiness exists. I haven't looked at, like, for example, do you consume more clumpy content if it's a series, like imagine watching Breaking Bad or Mad Men or something like that. Or imagine you're a firm and you're trying to sell a suite of products, like, a facial care line and a, moisturizer line and all this other stuff. Should you package it together and make it seem like people are progressing towards a goal? So here's what I do know. I know mathematically how to compute it. I know it's trivial for firms to do. I know it's predictive, but the part that's left unknown to me is the psychology of why, which is why I'm partnering right now with a lot of my more consumer psychology-oriented colleagues. We're going to start running a lot of behavioral experiments in the lab to try to get to the underlying psychological underpinnings of why people behave in a clumpy fashion. I'm not sure I've seen much about clumpiness, except what you see is you see stories in the news all the time about people kind of binging on content. And so I like the word clumpiness. Other people like the word binging. The reason I like clumpiness is that it refers to, the opposite, which is non-clumpy, which is kind of equally spaced kind of arrivals or equally spaced purchases. So what I would say is I don't think I've seen a story about clumpiness, but anytime you see a story about people binging content or people consuming things, a student sat up for 18 hours watching this, it applies. And the concept is so pervasive, and every time I talk to whether it's managers, students, academics about it, everyone believes it exists. The part, as you mentioned in your earlier question, that shocks people is that it's actually predictive of customer value. I think it dispels the idea that in some sense customers can just be categorized by a simple set of numbers. You need to go a little bit beyond that. You need to go a little bit beyond what I would call simple theories of how people behave. And what clumpiness, if you actually think about what clumpiness says is, if you look at recency, frequency, monetary value, which is kind of the historical basis of consumer behavior, it basically ignores what I call the inter-arrival times. It basically says I can take all the data, like if a 2-day it was a 2-day window, and then a 4-day window, then a 3-day window, then a 6-day window. I can throw all of that away, and all I need to know is when's the last time you came and how many times did you come. But what this dispels is that the arrival pattern of people is uninformative. It's very informative. People that come in bursts, then go away, and then come back in bursts, and then go away. It's just, I think those are just different types of people. I think those people are fundamentally different. I personally believe there are clumpy type people and non-clumpy type people. However, what we've also shown is it varies by product categories. So we found, for example, that women tend to be more clumpy than men. We found that younger people tend to be more clumpy in their consumption than older people. So I think what's really going to dispel, I think what the myth that we're going to dispel is that, like, not only are all people created equal, but that there are simple ways to just categorize all people into a certain type. I think what everyone's done is there's a whole class of mathematical models that have been popularized, although they've been around for 50 years, but have been popularized over the last 10 years, called hidden Markov models. The idea is very simple. Let's imagine there are two states of the world. You're in a hot state or a cold state, and you rotate back and forth between a hot and a cold state. That mathematical model is clumpiness. You're hot, you do a lot of stuff. You're cold, you don't. Hot, cold, hot, cold. What separates this work is the work I'm doing isn't ivory tower mathematics. It's a simple number that someone can compute. So I've fit hidden Markov models to data. What I wanted to do was to bring to the practitioner a way that they could compute a simple number. It's a statistic. It's not a statistics paper. It's a paper about a number, a statistic as we call it. You just compute the number and then do what you want with it. You could try to use it to predict customer value. You could use it to see, are men more clumpy than women? You could use it to segment people. That's what typifies and separates this work, is that it's a simple metric-based approach that practitioners can use. It's not a fancy modeling-based approach, but they're both trying to cover the same problem. What we've studied so far with reaching clumpy customers is we've studied whether email, catalogs, different types of marketing channels are more effective. And what we found, not surprisingly, is email has more of a short-term effect, as you would expect. Catalog has more of a longer-term effect. What we've yet to really understand is, are there certain words in a email or catalog or video campaign that will engage or if you'd like cause people to be more clumpy? Are there certain topics that are more clumpy, some product categories that will necessarily be more clumpy? All we've done so far is I think I've established the phenomenon exists. I know it exists across lots of industries. I know certain types of people tend to be more clumpy. The part that I haven't done, which is shocking because I'm a professor of marketing, is talk about the marketing implications of it yet. That's going to require bigger and newer data sets that allow me to link things about marketing campaigns to people's clumpy behavior. I know how to do it, it's just I need richer and better data to do it. I'm thinking about 3 different streams to follow up this clumpy research. First of all, I'd be thrilled to just analyze more data sets and prove how pervasive the clumpiness measure is. So I've analyzed data sets from Amazon, from CD Now, from eBay, from Hulu, from YouTube, and also from some traditional consumer packaged goods companies. Look, if P&G wants to contact me tomorrow, I'm happy to apply clumpiness to their work. If Google wants to contact me tomorrow, if Goldman Sachs wants to contact me tomorrow, if Pfizer wants to contact me tomorrow, I'm happy to work with their data and understand clumpiness and how it can predict customer value. So that's one area. I just want to apply it to new data sets. The second is I want to understand the psychological processes. Why are people behaving in a clumpy fashion? The third and final piece is I want to relate marketing activity to clumpiness. Now that's going to require not just people's behaviors, like what did they do, what websites did they visit, what did they purchase, but information about the marketing campaigns themselves. Possibly even the copy of the marketing campaign, which channels they were sent through, and that's going to allow me to come up with optimization, ways for firms to optimize their marketing campaigns to activate clumpiness. So those are the 3 avenues I'm going to be working on next.